I didn't set out to raise an internet star. I just wanted dinner without a fight. It started when Haley, 17 and restless, propped her phone on a cereal box, ordered wings and noodles, and hit record. The views arrived. In the attention economy, a house rearranges around whatever draws the crowd. The child becomes provider, the parent becomes logistics, and the audience acts like it has a vote on your life. Mukbang looks like food, but it sells sensation, pace, crunch, the illusion of endless plenty. To strangers it feels like company. To families it shifts gravity. You tell yourself it's harmless because no one's breaking laws. You swear you'll set limits when things stabilize. But reward loops crave escalation. Every milestone brought a bigger spread and longer streams. Groceries became props, sleep became prep, and health slipped into background noise you promised to address later. People asked about her size, like it was a scoreboard. I shut that down. At home we talked about stamina and how stairs felt after filming. Still, the money was real. A brand sent $1,000 for one video, and I paid the heating bill while calling it ambition, not risk. That's how families rationalize. We rename concern as support because we're afraid to be the brake that gets blamed for the crash. The tilt came when her Fry Mountain hit 800,000 views. You may think you'd hold the line. No filming on school nights. Real dinners at the table. But the line moves when your kid is paying for groceries. She asked me to taste on camera. Just for fun. Chat exploded with hearts for Mom, and I smiled while panic pooled in my gut. 2 weeks later she crossed 1 million. She planned a 1 mil feast. Live stream with sponsors. She wanted me beside her. Not as a cameo but as part of the act. I said yes before better judgment formed words. Saturday the light would go on, and our home would turn into a set. I told myself it was one night. I knew it wasn't. The night of the 1 mil feast felt like a birthday party thrown by strangers. Boxes of food lined our kitchen counters. Pizzas, fried chicken, pastries stacked like towers. Her friends from school came over, not to eat, but to film angles and handle the chat. I stood by with napkins, the only adult in the room, pretending that managing trash bags was parental control. She clicked, "Go live," and our living room stopped being ours. Comments streamed faster than I could read, donations popped up with emojis, and Haley lit up in a way I hadn't seen since she was little. She wasn't my daughter at that table. She was a host commanding a crowd. And here's the trap you don't see coming. When the internet applauds your child louder than you ever could, your role starts to shrink. At first, I told myself it was performance art, that it would pass like other fads. But in truth, mukbang isn't just eating. It's proof of endurance. People tuned in to see how far she'd go. That meant every stream had to be bigger than the last. She grinned for the camera, but I noticed her leaning heavier against the chair, breathing faster between bites. The audience typed "Queen" and "Legend," while I silently counted the soda cans. And when she pulled me into the frame, the crowd roared even louder. "Mom's in!" The chat filled with requests for me to eat too. I played along with a slice of pizza, smiling, while my chest tightened. It was supposed to be bonding, but I felt myself becoming a prop in someone else's production. After it ended, after the camera shut off and the friends left, our house smelled like grease and sugar. Haley crashed on the couch, phone still buzzing with congratulations. I cleaned alone, stacking untouched leftovers, realizing this wasn't a phase anymore. It was momentum. And momentum doesn't ask permission. It only asks what you're willing to sacrifice next. Momentum had its own calendar. The Monday after the feast, Haley skipped school claiming she was planning content. Planning meant scrolling for food deals and messaging brands, who now treated her like a minor celebrity. I argued. She waved me off with, "Mom, this is my career." At 17, career is a word kids borrow to silence parents. Still, I let her say it, because fighting drained more than giving in. Here's the part no one tells you. Internet fame doesn't just consume the person on camera. It rearranges the whole family's schedule. Grocery runs doubled. Trash day looked like we catered parties for 50. Relatives called, pretending to be impressed, slipping in questions about her weight journey. I defended her like a reflex, though privately I noticed her struggling to climb the stairs. When she laughed it off, I laughed too. That's what parents do. We mirror, hoping to delay confrontation. Her channel metrics became dinner conversation. Instead of, "How was class?" I heard, "I gained 20,000 subs today." I found myself learning terms like retention rate and watch time, not because I cared about YouTube, but because it was the only way to stay part of her world. Every time I tried to steer toward balance, exercise, rest, even a simple family walk, she pushed back with numbers. You can't argue with numbers. They feel like facts. By spring, the neighbors started noticing. Delivery vans pulled up 3-4 times a day. One woman at the mailbox asked if I was running a catering business. I laughed politely, ashamed to explain that my daughter's job was eating on camera. Suburbia runs on silent judgment. You know when you're being measured, even if no one says it outright. That night, I asked Haley to scale back. Just one fewer video a week. She stared at me, cheeks flushed from hours of filming, and said, "Do you want me to fail? You don't get it, Mom. If I stop, they'll move on." She wasn't wrong. In the influencer economy, loyalty is thin. But as her words hit, I realized what was slipping wasn't just her health. It was the thread tying us together, and it was fraying faster than I could knot it. The summer was when it all tipped. Haley turned 18 in June, and instead of a party she announced a birthday binge stream. Sponsors sent cakes, candy, novelty burgers stacked higher than my kitchen counter. She invited classmates who treated our house like a backstage pass. They snapped selfies with her, posted them with captions like, "Hanging with the Mukbang Queen," and I stood at the sink invisible. When you're a parent, you think adulthood at 18 will hand you back some authority. It doesn't. It just takes away the last bit of leverage you had. She waved her ID like a shield, telling me, "I'm an adult now." But adulthood isn't a number, it's responsibility, and responsibility wasn't paying attention to her. Views were. The irony was, the bigger she got online, the smaller her world became. She rarely left the house except for food pickups. Friends who used to invite her to movies now dropped by only when the camera was rolling. Even family dinners shrank into takeout rehearsals for her next video. When I tried to suggest other outlets, volunteering, a job with structure, even a college class, she shot back with revenue screenshots. I couldn't argue with the 4-digit deposits, even if I knew what they cost her body and peace of mind. Neighbors stopped asking questions and started whispering. At the grocery store, I overheard a woman say, "That's the Mukbang Mom," as if my identity had been rewritten into her channel. It stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. I had allowed our home, and myself, to orbit her content. Parents like to believe we're guiding ships, but in truth, we get pulled by tides stronger than us. One night, after a particularly long stream, I heard her coughing in the bathroom. I knocked. She brushed me off with a cheerful, "I'm fine," but her voice cracked in a way I couldn't ignore. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of a truth I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't just her experiment anymore. It was an ecosystem built on her body, and everyone, from fans to sponsors, was feeding off it, and I was letting it happen. By July, her uploads had a rhythm that controlled the house. Mondays were planning, Tuesdays shopping, Wednesdays filming, Thursdays editing. Weekends meant live streams that stretched into midnight. I no longer scheduled family events. I worked around hers. When relatives asked if we were free for a barbecue, I checked her content calendar before answering. That's when it hit me. Our family life had become programming notes for strangers online. I tried to reassert some order. I set curfews on deliveries, asked her to film earlier so we could sleep, even banned filming in the dining room. She laughed, moved the setup to her bedroom, and told her fans, "Mom's being strict." They flooded the chat with jokes about me, some playful, some cutting. For the first time, I felt like I was fighting not just my daughter, but an army of faceless voices cheering her defiance. Money added another layer. Checks arrived with her name on them. She bought new lights, microphones, even hired a local team to edit clips. She gave me $200 once, casual as handing over allowance, and said, "For groceries, Mom." I should have refused, but I didn't, because the bills were real, and her income was real, and in that moment it felt easier to accept than to confront. That's how erosion works. Not one big storm, but small compromises washing away your stance. I noticed her body straining in ways she ignored. Breathless after stairs, sweating just carrying in bags. I brought up health gently, framing it as energy and balance. She rolled her eyes, pointed to her analytics, and said, "People love me like this. Why can't you?" Those words cut deeper than any insult, because they revealed the unspoken truth. The internet's approval now mattered more than mine. The breaking point came one Friday when she invited me into a stream again. I declined. She pouted, accused me of being unsupportive, then went live and told her fans, "Mom's too embarrassed to be here." Comments rolled in mocking me, some even speculating about my weight. I wasn't on camera, but I was still consumed by the machine. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after she'd gone to bed, staring at her empty soda cans, realizing I was losing more than her health. I was losing my place as her anchor. August heat pressed into the walls, and our house smelled faintly of fried food no matter how often I cleaned. The air itself seemed saturated with her channel. Even when she wasn't filming, the ring light stood ready in her room like a permanent guest. I began to miss silence, the kind of quiet where meals are just meals and not content. I started confiding in my sister over the phone. She said I should put my foot down. Easy to say when it isn't your kid funding half the household. Still, her words stayed with me. Parents like to think control is a switch we can flip back on. But once money and fame enter, you're negotiating with forces you don't own. Haley wasn't sneaking out or failing school. She was working, just in a world I barely understood. That made it harder to justify hard rules without looking like the villain. School approached in September, and counselors emailed about college prep. I tried to bring it up. "Maybe just apply somewhere. Keep options open." She shook her head. "Mom, I already have a career. Why would I take on debt for something I don't need?" Her tone wasn't rebellious. It was confident, which somehow worried me more. At 17, she had craved my approval, but at 18, she believed she had outgrown it. You might imagine I could bargain, trade less filming for more freedom, but bargaining requires leverage. She had the income, the audience, and the stubbornness of youth. I had only concern, which sounded to her like interference. So instead of rules, I started making boundaries for myself. I refused to be on camera. I stopped cleaning up after streams. I told her calmly, "If you want this life, you manage its mess." It wasn't control, but it was a step toward reclaiming my role as more than her assistant. The first time I held that line, she sulked, filmed anyway, and ignored me for a day. But when she realized the trash hadn't been touched, she hauled it out herself. It was a small victory, but it reminded me that while I couldn't dictate her choices, I could protect my own. The challenge was learning where my responsibility ended and hers began, something no parenting book had prepared me for. By fall, the seasons changed, but her routine didn't. The neighborhood kids went back to soccer practice. College freshmen left for dorms. Yet Haley stayed anchored to her desk and ring light. Packages piled at our door. Snack boxes from fans. PR samples from brands. I stopped opening them. They weren't gifts for us. They were tools for her audience. What unsettled me most was how normal it began to feel. I no longer blinked at 6 pizzas arriving on a Wednesday, or at her talking for hours to a screen instead of people. That's the danger of repetition. You adapt, even when the situation erodes what you value. But adaptation has a cost. I felt lonelier in my own home than I ever had before. I started noticing patterns in her speech. She spoke in catchphrases, sound bites designed for the chat. It was like she had a public dialect and a private silence. Off camera, she was quieter, withdrawn, as if saving energy for her next broadcast. Sometimes I'd ask how she was feeling, and she'd just shrug, scrolling through comments. It wasn't teenage moodiness anymore. It was the reality of someone outsourcing their self-worth to strangers. When my sister visited in October, she barely recognized the house. She whispered, "This feels like a studio, not a home." I bristled, defensive, but deep down I knew she was right. Haley gave her a quick tour of her setup, proud as a new homeowner. I watched from the hallway, feeling both admiration for her resourcefulness and grief for what was slipping away. The shift came one evening when a brand offered her a paid appearance at a food expo 2 states over. She was ecstatic. I tried to be supportive, but the idea of her performing in front of a live audience unsettled me more than the endless streams. Online she was untouchable. In person she would be fragile, and I didn't know if she could handle the scrutiny. She begged me to drive her. I didn't answer right away. That pause, that hesitation, was enough to open the next fracture between us. She treated the expo like her debut. For weeks she planned outfits, scheduled posts, even rehearsed eating in front of a mirror. I drove her there on a Saturday morning. 2 hours of silence between us, broken only by her humming with nerves. When we arrived, a line of fans already stretched outside the convention hall. They weren't just kids, they were grown adults, waiting to watch a teenager eat. The sight chilled me. Inside, booths overflowed with fried samples and neon drinks. Haley was escorted to a stage with bright banners, her name plastered across screens. I stood off to the side, surrounded by strangers who chanted her username. For the first time, I understood the scale of what she'd built. It wasn't a quirky online hobby, it was an industry, and she was a product. When she took the stage, she performed flawlessly, smiled, joked, devoured plate after plate as the crowd cheered. I should have felt proud, and part of me did, but pride mixed with dread as I watched her hands tremble slightly between bites. No one noticed except me. To them, she was unstoppable. To me, she was still my kid, pushing her body harder than it was meant to go. Afterward, she was glowing, buzzing from the applause. Fans crowded her for selfies. Brands pitched her more deals. She hugged me, breathless, and said, "See, Mom, this is real. This is my future." I nodded, but inside something shifted. I realized no warning from me would make her slow down. Only experience could teach her limits, and the price of that lesson scared me. Driving home that night, she scrolled through congratulatory messages while I kept my eyes on the road. The headlights cut through darkness, and I thought about boundaries again. I couldn't stop her train, but I could step off the tracks myself. That quiet resolve settled in my chest. If I couldn't save her from the spotlight, I had to save myself from being consumed by it. The expo unlocked more offers, sponsorships, collaborations, even invitations to travel abroad. Haley threw herself into it, working harder than ever. But the more the outside world wanted from her, the less she seemed present at home. Meals we once shared became solo rehearsals for streams. Her laughter, once spontaneous, now sounded rehearsed, like she was saving the genuine parts of herself for her audience. I tried small interventions. I suggested walks together, offered to cook healthier meals, even planned a weekend trip just for us. Each time she declined with the same excuse. "I can't, Mom. I'll lose momentum." Momentum? That word again. Her real master. I realized she wasn't just chasing success. She was afraid of disappearing if she slowed down for even a moment. And fear is stronger than any advice a parent can give. Neighbors kept their distance, but gossip lingered. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering, "She's the one whose daughter eats for a living." Their tone wasn't cruel, but it carried pity. I wanted to snap back, to explain that my daughter was talented, entrepreneurial driven. Instead, I just lowered my head and finished shopping. Defending her to strangers suddenly felt like defending myself too. The hardest night came when she collapsed onto the couch after a long stream, clutching her side and wincing. I rushed over, but she waved me off, insisting it was nothing, just cramps. I offered to take her to urgent care, but she refused. "They'll just tell me to quit," she said. That sentence sat heavy between us. It wasn't that she didn't understand the risks, it was that she had accepted them. Lying in bed that night, I finally admitted the truth. I couldn't fight this battle for her. I couldn't yank her offline, couldn't make her listen, couldn't carry her choices on my shoulders anymore. What I could do was decide how much of myself I was willing to give to the machine she had built. And for the first time, I considered what it might mean to pull back, not from her, but from the endless orbit around her channel. By winter, I'd drawn the line. Not with ultimatums, those never worked, but with quiet decisions. I stopped rearranging my life around her filming schedule. I reclaimed the dining room as mine, lit candles at dinner even if she ate upstairs with her camera. I started saying no to cameo requests, no to managing her deliveries, no to being the invisible crew member. Each no felt small, but together they gave me back pieces of myself. Haley noticed, of course. At first she sulked, accused me of being unsupportive, but when I didn't cave, she adjusted. She found her own editor, hired someone to help with logistics, and leaned more on her friends. I watched her stumble, watched her miss deadlines, and though it hurt to see, it also taught her, I wasn't the net under every fall. That was the boundary she hadn't believed I could hold. Our relationship didn't magically heal. Some nights we barely spoke, passing like roommates in the hallway. But other nights she came downstairs, tired from streaming, and sat with me in the kitchen, just sipping tea in silence. Those moments were fragile but real, free from the audience. I clung to them, reminders that beneath the brand, she was still my daughter. Her health remained a shadow hanging over us. She brushed off doctor appointments, swore she could manage. I stopped pressing as hard, not out of indifference, but because I understood now, change had to be her choice. Parents can warn, plead, beg, but adulthood means watching your child steer her own ship, even when it drifts into rough waters. I don't know where this will end for Haley. Fame is fickle, and bodies aren't machines. What I do know is that I can't sacrifice my entire self to hold her together. I love her, I worry every day, but I also live my own life. That's the bittersweet truth of parenthood no one warns you about. Sometimes protecting your child means stepping back, and protecting yourself means finally letting go.